Back to Capitol tonight. Well, as we were just discussing with the congressman before the break, President Obama's tax cut deal with Republican leaders has ignited the wrath of the Democratic liberal base. And now there's even talk among some corners of a potential primary against the president in 2012. Now, joining us to add some perspective to all of this is Syracuse University political science professor Grant Reeher. Thanks very much for your time tonight, Grant.
My pleasure.
It's good to see you. So things are not looking fantastic for President Obama. He is, no matter what he does, he seems to get lambasted, coming out of a bad midterm cycle. Can he get it back?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to bear in mind that a lot of this still has to do with the economy. So to write him off now for 2012, I think is just very, very premature. You can imagine a lot of different scenarios for him running for re-election, and if the economy turns around, I think he's going to be a very, very strong candidate, personally.
You know, the interesting thing about the tax cuts is that they were a real issue in a lot of races this past November. So clearly he feels pressured to do something. He feels pressured to do something with the Republicans. But the Democrats are really, some of them, digging in their heels. I mean, is he going to be able to get it in the Senate? It looks like right now is the real problem because they are, of course, more closely divided. Do you think eventually they will help him out?
Well, first of all, he's going to get the Republican support on this. The Republicans are very happy with the deal, and so that will help him. And if to think about the math, then he can lose a few Democrats and still have this passed by a pretty healthy margin. I think the bigger story here for this, and I know that he's getting a lot of criticism, particularly from the left in his party, is to remember that one of the things that got a lot of independents and a lot of young people excited about his campaign in 2008 was the message that he was going to change the way politics worked inside the Beltway. And that hasn't happened, and I think that there was a reset button that was pushed after the midterm elections. You saw it in his first press conference that he was going to try to actually make good on that promise. And I think this is an effort to do that. He's obviously reaching across the aisle. He's cutting a deal. He's making a compromise that a lot of folks on his left don't like. But this was the kind of appeal to change the dynamic in Washington that has not happened, and I think is something that he's trying to now get some traction on by being more open to the other side.
You know, though, I think that a lot of times people say that they want change and they really want to see something different, but then both active ends of the party are the ends that are the most extreme in both the Republicans and the Democrats, and those people yell when you start shooting for the middle. They get very upset, and those are the people that you need to curry favor with when it comes time for presidential primaries and caucuses.
Well, but then the question is, where do they go? I mean, where do the people on the left of his party go? This is what Bill Clinton figured out. And I think that liberals and folks in the left wing of the Democratic Party have a lot of reasons to get behind this president. I mean, look at what he was able to accomplish with health care reform. There are all sorts of social and historical reasons why I think this president running for re-election is going to re-energize that base. I think it's just very premature to write that off and say he's lost that base, he's lost that wing of the party. There's just a lot to happen between now and when we really get into that election season.
Well, one of the things that has to happen, of course, is that the Republicans have to settle on a candidate, and there's all sorts of people moving around. You have everybody from Sarah Palin to even our own former Governor George Pataki. The interesting thing, though, is that if the Republicans choose someone who is perhaps more conservative, then there's another guy in New York who's hoping that maybe he can shoot up the middle, and that's Mayor Bloomberg. And he gave a speech this morning that was clearly designed to make a stab at trying to attract centrist voters, but also he said that elected officials in Washington should stop demagoguing and start delivering on promises, on jobs promises. Do you think that America's ready for a guy like Mayor Bloomberg?
Well, if there ever was, I think, an election cycle where a third party or an independent candidate would have some appeal, it would be this one. If you think about the dynamics of 2008, and then you think about the dynamics of this midterm that we just had and the fallout from this and just the nastiness and the hyper-partisanship that was part of that, election season, I mean, this would be the moment. I think the ground would be very fertile, and certainly that speech sounded a lot like someone who might be thinking of putting together a campaign. And the other piece of it is, of course, if the economy stays flat, if the economy doesn't turn around, then a candidate that's putting forward an expertise on the economy and has ideas about how to reinvigorate the economy, and that speech indicated that already, that's a candidacy that could get some traction. But I think you put your finger on it at the beginning. It really depends on who the Republicans put forward, and I would think that they would actually seek out a more moderate candidate, although certainly you've got the Tea Party and you've got a lot of forces there that are pushing that party over to the right. But I still think at the end of the day, they're going to see this as an election that they want to be very competitive in, and I think that would suggest a more moderate candidate.
There was actually a very interesting recent poll. Public policy polling actually put something out. It was Bloomberg registering at 11%, with Obama at 44% and Mitt Romney of Massachusetts at 38%. So there's that moderate that you were talking about. The thing is, though, he's also quite rich. I mean, and we saw in this cycle that people who are rich didn't necessarily do so well. Meg Whitman, I'm thinking of perhaps in California, but maybe if you are willing to spend, I don't know, $50 billion, a lot, could that really turn the tide?
Well, I think we've also reached a period where there's been a reaction against that kind of injection of money into the system. I mean, part of this was because of the recent Supreme Court decision and the awareness of that and how that brought in the corporate money back into the system. So we know that the presidential election is going to be incredibly expensive. It was in 2008. Obama spent tons of money, but it wasn't his own money. So I think that someone coming in and spending millions and millions and millions, or as you suggest, maybe even billion of their own dollars, I think would be viewed differently than having this huge expense that comes from individual donations. And again, I think there'll be some scrutiny as to the size of those donations in 2012.
Well, of course, yeah, 50 billion is probably a ridiculous number. However, maybe multiple millions into the billion with a single might not be so crazy when it comes to Mayor Bloomberg. In the meantime, you and I are, I'm sure, going to be talking a lot about this sort of thing, because really it's not 2012 yet, it's not even 2011. So, Grant Reeher, I want to thank you very much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.